to show that I ain't scared of this AI moderation people or whatever. To show I'm not scared of these bums that are terminating all our channels. I'm gonna make another video right after I got done with that Forrest Gump video. And today we're doing something some people are quite surprised I haven't made this video yet. That I'm doing a top 15 best presidents. I've done my favorites. Now we're going for the best. It's gonna be a little different from my favorites. I think I made that quite clear. And although this is definitely my opinion, and am I biased? You know it. Do I care that I'm biased? No. No, I don't. Anyway, to begin with, the 15th best president is Ulysses S. Grant. And despite that one person that made the claim that he's the worst president, I disagree. I think he's the 15th best. Great for civil rights. Definitely needed after the disastrous presidency of Andrew Johnson. And created the Department of Justice. Very great for civil rights. One of the best civil rights presidents. And considering how he's from the 1800s, that's a feat. No, granted, the reason why he hasn't made the top 10, he does indeed have flaws, like the corruption and the panic of 1873. Yeah, that's not very good. So that's gonna take him down a couple rankings. But I still do think overall he was a good president. Definitely much needed after the last guy, Andrew Johnson. 14th best president is William McKinley, another fellow Civil War veteran from Ohio. Great economic recovery. It's one of the greatest in American history. Very impressive. In fact, he did it through tariffs. Usually that doesn't work. Usually tariffs fail, yet somehow he made them work. That is a feat. That is an accomplishment. And also America becoming a world power began under McKinley. Very impactful president. Very skilled president. Very effective. Very underrated too. A lot of people don't give him his credit. And I've seen others claim he's one of the worst because they hate tariffs so much. But I'm not that blinded by my hatred of tariffs. I am more of a Reagan guy, so naturally not going to be a fan of tariffs. And some of those advocates for lower tariffs are going to be higher on this list. And the main reason why he hasn't made the top 10 as well, he got cut short, so he didn't have a lot of time to really show off his greatness. That could have been. And also his imperialism. I'm not too much of a fan of imperialism, but it's not as bad. I don't hate it as much as certain people. But it still sets him back. First term Grover Cleveland. I have to emphasize this is the first term. Considering his second term wasn't pretty. His first term, he was just like Calvin Coolidge, a fiscal conservative, very responsible, lowered the debt, limited the power of the government. When people wanted him to go all imperialistic, he said no. And that's good. Very effective, just minding his own business, and that's what the president should be. Everything that makes Calvin Coolidge great, Grover Cleveland did it. Granted, he didn't do it to the same extent as Calvin Coolidge, so he's not as high as Calvin Coolidge is. And plus, his second term kind of has to be factored in, considering he's the same person, so that's why he's not top 10. Rutherford Hayes, he's all the good of Grant, and he fixed all his flaws. Started civil service reform, and also great economic recovery. And also less big on tariffs, so that sets him higher than McKinley. Also, magnificent beard. The beards, if it were up to me, he'd probably be high because of the beard. But I'm not going to rank presidents based off facial hair. I could totally do that, though. But not today. Some flaws as well, he didn't do as much as he wanted. Got defeat. A lot of his policies got defeated in the House. And some of his people would do his little civil service reform more effectively than he would. But he started it. He got the ball rolling, so he should get the credit for it. And also great foreign policy. He saved the nation of Paraguay. And now Paraguayans love him. The Paraguayans are one of the few people that give Hayes his due. And also he did withdraw the troops. And that was pretty bad. So that's why he also doesn't make it to top 10. 11th best president is James Madison. Now, am I biased when I'm ranking him? Yes. Yes, I am. Because he may have wrote in the Constitution when he wasn't president, so that's not why. Before the War of 1812, very loyal to the Jeffersonian policies. All that great stuff Jefferson did, he was doing. Then came the War of 1812, which is the only reason why he's not top 10. I've made it quite clear that I don't think the War of 1812 is that big of a deal. White House burned down. Big deal. We put it back together. It's fine. But then again, that is why he's not that's why he didn't make top 10. That is still pretty bad, though. Now, we're officially in the top 10. The 10th greatest president is Harry Truman. Now, am I biased because he's from Missouri and I'm from Missouri? Probably. But I'm not as biased with that as Jackson Jefferson Goated is. Although I'm pretty sure he ranked him in the same spot. But he's not one of my favorites, though. Well, he is up there, but he's not like top 10 favorites. So I'm not as biased with that. He took control of the presidency on such short notice after the death of FDR. And in fact, he was still able to handle it quite effectively. That's impressive. The nuking Japan was ultimately the right decision to end World War II with less casualties than if it had been a land invasion. So nuking Japan was definitely for the best. And also that economic recovery that came after World War II started to end the process that would end the Great Depression. It started under Truman. Granted, it wouldn't be seen till the next guy. But, Truman gets some credit. And also, very impressive campaigning skills. No one thought he was going to win, but then he did. No one expected much of him, but then he proved them all wrong. And that's impressive. Very good president. The Marshall Plan. The Marshall Plan was very great. Prevented a World War III. Very effective foreign policy after the end of World War II. Whereas foreign policy was less effective was the Cold War began while he was president. And the Cold War is not very good. Very defining of the next several years of the 20th century. Very defining. And also the Korean War. Korean War was it wasn't as disastrous as Vietnam because we didn't lose, but it was kind of pointless. After all that fighting, it was a draw, and now we still got South Korea and North Korea and tensions between those two countries. Not very good. Also, I'd probably find MacArthur was probably the best for the best. See, MacArthur was kind of wanted to go crazy with the nukes, and that probably wouldn't have been a good idea. And also, he had to deal with some of the lowest ever approval rating for a president. But, he still kept in. He still stuck it to the end. Of course, the flaws beginning of Cold War in Korea also pretty sets him down. I think he was definitely a better president than FDR. Because a lot of FDR's flaws, Truman doesn't have. Number 9, James K. Polk, because he's a very good president. Very effective president. Everything he promised to do, he did it. Granted, he didn't have much promises. Just get more territory and lower tariffs. So that was basically it. But, he did it. And also run for one term. That's what you also did. Kept that promise, too. A lot of land. Most land out of any president in one term. It's impressive. Some Thomas Jefferson things right there. He also lowered tariffs. And as someone that doesn't support tariffs, I think that's good. It's a good on you, Polk. What sets him far is all that land he acquired kind of led to the drastically increased tensions between the North and South, which would lead to the Civil War over what to do with that land. It just lighted a fire to the Civil War, and he just ran away from it, leaving it to Zachary Taylor, who would then die. And then he left it to Millard Fillmore, and it all started under Polk. It really began under Polk. Well, you could argue it began under President, but it really started to become a pressing issue after Polk's presidency. So that's why I don't rank him as high. Dwight Eisenhower. Am I biased because I like Ike? Yes. He created NASA, the 50s, one of the biggest economic booms in American history. A lot of people love the 50s, consider it the good old days. In some aspects, it was. It really was. great economy. After all the years of economic struggle, finally ends under Eisenhower. Integration. NASA. NASA's kind of cool, I guess. We went to the moon with NASA, and he created NASA. So that's kind of neat. Some flaws with Eisenhower is, his foreign policy was pretty bad, using the CIA to overthrow democratically elected countries and replacing them with American-sponsored groups, which would lead to all sorts of disasters later down the line. It's definitely not for the best. And also, every year he was president, the budget was at 1 point balanced. That's good. That's some good fiscal responsibility demonstrated by Dwight Eisenhower. And also, the interstate highway system, pretty good. Driving is much easier and better thanks to Dwight David Eisenhower. So yeah, very good president. Now, next best president after Dwight Eisenhower is one Ronald Reagan. Now, is this bias? No. If it was truly bias, I would have ranked him higher. But it's Ronald Reagan. All that issues with the Cold War, Reagan ended it. He started the end of the Cold War. Sure, it didn't actually end while he was president, but he made it inevitable. He did all the hard work for it. Even no matter who would have been president, the Cold War was going to end. Reagan rightfully deserves the credit. We're ending the Cold War. And also, some much needed fiscal conservatism that was needed after the years of Jimmy Carter. Reaganomics, a lot of people don't like it, but it worked. He ended the Cold War and stagflation. Stagflation has been gripping us since the 70s, and it finally ends when Ronald Reagan is president. And not only does it end, it leads to one of the greatest economic recoveries in American history. So very good policies demonstrated by one Ronald Reagan. And also another reason is that he was one of the few modern presidents that understood a very simple concept. Very simple concept that most of our modern presidents don't seem to understand. Well, one, tariffs are bad. He gave a little spiel on tariffs. But also another thing. Hang on, let me find it.
The business of our nation goes forward. These United States are confronted with an economic affliction of great proportions. We suffer from the longest and one of the worst sustained inflations in our national history. It distorts our economic decisions, penalizes thrift, and crushes the struggling young and the fixed-income elderly alike. It threatens to shatter the lives of millions of our people. Idle industries have cast workers into unemployment, human misery, and personal indignity. Those who do work are denied a fair return for their labor by a tax system which penalizes successful achievement and keeps us from maintaining full productivity. But great as our tax burden is, it has not kept pace with public spending. For decades, we have piled deficit upon deficit, mortgaging our future and our children's future for the temporary convenience of the present. To continue this long trend is to guarantee tremendous social, cultural, political, and economic upheavals. You and I, as individuals, can, by borrowing, live beyond our means, but for only a limited period of time. Why then should we think that collectively, as a nation, we're not bound by that same limitation? We must act today in order to preserve tomorrow. And let there be no misunderstanding. We're going to begin to act, beginning today. The economic ills we suffer have come upon us over several decades. They will not go away in days, weeks, or months, but they will go away. They will go away because we, as Americans, have the capacity now, as we've had in the past, to do whatever needs to be done to preserve this last and greatest bastion of freedom. In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
He understood the simple concept that government is the problem. He understood that far better than any other future president. Now, did he do all the stuff he promised when it came to all that spending stuff, deficits? Did he deliver on his promises? No. No, he didn't. But the thing of it is, when he did try to do that, but the dang Congress always shot it down. So when you think of it, it's not really his fault. He really was a limited government guy because he didn't want to expand executive power in order to get it done. See, so he's more limited government than Andrew Jackson. Or should I say King Andrew. Also, another thing that makes Ronald Reagan great.
You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity.
Yeah. I don't really need to explain why I hate tariffs, because Ronald Reagan just did. Ronald Reagan against tariffs. Now, that's also real good. That also is why he's a better president than Andrew Jackson, because he had tariffs in place. Led to the nullification crisis. So yeah, he supported free trade, and free trade is good. Free trade is best trade. Free trade, all that nonsense they spout out about how it loses American jobs and all that nonsense. That's protectionist propaganda, and Ronald Reagan understood it. And I feel like I've talked about Ronald Reagan for long enough. Let me end off with this.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
All right, next president, Theodore Roosevelt. I mean, you could say this is pretty biased too, since this is the Roosevelt-Reagan channel. I do think Theodore Roosevelt was ultimately a better president, because simply, he has less baggage. No disastrous war on drugs, no high debt, no empty promises on deficit and public spending. No, Roosevelt doesn't have any of that. And plus, protecting food and drugs, national parks are pretty nice. And, better foreign policy that gave us the Panama Canal, which would help free trade. Also, not really much of a tariff guy either. So maybe this is revealing my bias against tariffs. That did that more than I was expecting. But, I just don't like tariffs. It's Theodore Roosevelt. I don't think I need to explain much. Fifth best president, Calvin Coolidge. Very underrated president. Again, he's better than Reagan because he has a lot less baggage. All that stuff he promised about limited government, Calvin Coolidge got more of it done. And, just much better when it came to the physical conservatism. He was kind of more effective at it. Unless there was no ineffective war on drugs. Though granted, he didn't end the Cold War. Well, there was no Cold War. So that's not really fair. Out of all the presidents after the Founding Fathers, they would approve of Calvin Coolidge the most. He gave Indians citizenship that they rightfully deserved. After years of suffering, especially by one Andrew Jackson, he sent them away to the future Trail of Tears. Maybe it wasn't while he was president, but it would definitely not have happened if it weren't for Andrew Jackson. So, that's why he won't be on the top 15 best list. Because he's just too flawed. I don't understand why someone would, be so biased enough to put him in the top 5. I would know nothing about bias. Anyway, 4th best president, James Monroe. Again, nothing about bias. No, nothing about bias. He was just a clone of Thomas Jefferson. He's got no embargo act. And Thomas Jefferson, all that ideas of limiting the federal government, all those great ideas on free trade, limited government, physical conservatism, and all that stuff, James Monroe did it. And plus the air of good feelings. The most united and happy our country's ever been was while he was president. And also the Monroe Doctrine, very influential and impactful on the foreign policies of a lot of future presidents, like Theodore Roosevelt. Just a very unifying man. Only one of 2 presidents to be elected unanimously without any opponents because he was that beloved and popular. Though, granted, there is one big flaw. The Missouri Compromise. That, when I say Polk's start of the Civil War would lead to that road, sure, he definitely made it a lot worse and bigger and definitely lit the fire way more. The first ever sign that Civil War would come was with the Missouri Compromise. And it was James Monroe signed it. So that's definitely the biggest blemish on his presidency. Though everything else went right. Oh, and there was also the Panic of 1819. But he was able to solve it. And he solved it through less government, not more government, which is always good. 3rd best president is Thomas Jefferson. Louisiana Purchase, repealing the god-awful whiskey tax, which was a proven failure. He got rid of it. Repealed the very cruel and unjust Alien Sedition Act. Rightfully freed all those wrongfully arrested. Also cut other taxes. It led to a better economy. Also very popular and beloved. Not as beloved as Monroe because, he still had to win. But he still won in a big landslide, so he practically won it unanimously. If Pinckney never ran, it wouldn't change nothing. And also, it's just Thomas Jefferson. I feel like if you watch a Jackson Jefferson Go video, you'll find out why. Everything Ronald Reagan and Calvin Coolidge wanted to be, Thomas Jefferson did. Lower spending, lower taxes, lower government. That's just my ideal president. Everything I want in a president, Thomas Jefferson did it. Granted, he's not my favorite because Reagan is really good at speaking. And Jefferson, not so much. He's not as much of a charismatic character. So that's why I like Reagan more. But Thomas Jefferson was definitely the much better president. The 2nd best president is Abraham Lincoln. He saved the country and freed the slaves. Washington is definitely the best president because there would be no presidency without George Washington. He laid the groundwork of what the presidency should be. I would not be ranking all these presidents. None of this would happen if it wasn't for George Washington. He's the only person to go run for election to win 100% of the electoral vote and 100% of the popular vote twice. One of the most unifying figures in our nation's history. He knew how bad partisan politics would be. He knew it better than anyone. Did we listen? No, we didn't. Are we still seeing the consequences that he predicted? Yes, we are. And so it's a shame. If we listened to this man, we'd be much better off. He had all the right ideas on what the president should be. His only flaw, which he's not perfect, if you ask me what I think his biggest mistake is he relied on Alexander Hamilton way too much. Way too much. National banks are pretty bad, in my opinion. And just a stronger government after we just got done rebelling against the strong government of Great Britain, that's not good. Though granted, Washington would listen to others like Thomas Jefferson when it came to the issue of the Bill of Rights. He signed off the Bill of Rights. The 10 amendments to the Constitution. The 10, and those are all the best amendments to the Constitution. And he signed them all. So that's good. No other amendment to the Constitution is as good as those first 10. So they all fell off. But, he was the one that signed all 10 of them into law. So we have Washington to thank for that, too. And also another big issue that could apply to Washington, Jefferson, Monroe, all these unifying figures. You might think, oh, they're so unifying. Why didn't they end slavery? So you think that'd be the biggest flaw. Well, they're unifying, yes. But the reason why is because they don't take bold stances on such controversial issues. If they did, they would have lost all that unity and would have dragged the country into civil war. So I don't think it's that simple. So I don't think it's much of a blemish on Monroe, Madison, and Washington. The slavery issue was far more complicated than it would be now. From our modern perspective, it seems easy on what you could do about slavery. Just say no to it. But it's far more complicated. Especially back in the day. So I don't think it's fair to downgrade these presidencies because of slavery. And that's the list. Originally this was going to be just 10. But I thought 15 would make it more interesting. Because I wanted to include people like Madison, Hayes, Cleveland, McKinley, and Grant. I wanted to include them. They were going to be honorable mentions, but then I thought, why not just make it 15? And so I did. That's just what I did. And after this video, again, I will be continuing to make videos. I will not be going on lockdown in fear. I will just continue like nothing is going on. I already got some projects planned. We got the 15 worst presidents. And after that, I realized all the rest of the presidents that weren't ranked, excluding the exempt ones, there's 10 mid ones. I'll be going over those ones too. But there's not 15 of them. I'll just be doing 10 of the middle presidents after doing the best and worst. This is also right after my favorites, which is right here. So, expect more videos. In fact, I'm probably going to be uploading more frequently. I'm going to just double show I ain't scared of this AI nonsense. I am very anti-AI, so to cower in fear before it would be antithetical to my beliefs. And if I get shut down, that's not going to be good. That ain't going to be pretty. But I'll still do it no matter what. But now, if you have any problems with this list, one, I don't know, I feel like my list is pretty good. And two, you could probably let me know. Did I rank some presidents too high? Yeah, I probably did. Did I rank some too low? Probably not as much as the first one, as that first thing. Maybe you're like, what if you're like a really big fan of Theodore Roosevelt and you think he's the greatest president? Well, I don't. But if you think that, you could let me know about it. If you're like some kind of diehard Andrew Jackson fan and you're kind of upset about what I've had to say about him, then you could definitely voice your opinion about that. If you're like some kind of Reagan hater, one, I may not like what you have to say about Reagan because it's probably going to be wrong or just misinformed. If you're going to have some misinformed Reagan opinion, you could let me know about that one too. But just saying, it's probably going to be wrong. Because Ronald Reagan was great. Very, very great. When he said make America great again, he meant it. And he actually did. Now, and also, any flaws? Or like, what if you really like it? What if this is your exact list and you're thinking, wow, we have the same opinions, man. Yeah, let me know about that one too. That's going crazy. That'll be real crazy. Anyway, or maybe you just want to know that I have the perfect list. It's absolutely perfect. No flaws whatsoever. And if you're hyped to see the worst list, let me know. And don't worry, Jackson fans, for like the two that are out there. He won't be. He won't make it. He won't be on that list, so don't worry. Anyway, I think that's about it. Got nothing else? That's all I have to say about that.